the country of Syria. Joining us right now is Florida Senator Marco Rubio. He joins us from Capitol Hill.
Good morning.
Senator, what do you think?
It was the right thing to do. Number one, it was legal. It had to be done, but he was in violation of an agreement that we were guarantors of, that he would get rid of chemical weapons, and he lied and he didn't do so. Also in violation of international law, also in violation of a UN Security Council resolution. Number two is we have American troops, hundreds of American troops now embedded throughout Syria and Iraq, and this guy's dropping sarin gas, so it posed a threat to American personnel. And number three, I think it achieved a very clear military objective, and that is we are going to destroy one of his 6 airfields, or significantly degrade one of his 6 airfields, the airfield from which he had conducted that sarin attack 48 hours ago. It had a clear mission. He gave the significant resources necessary to achieve it, and they achieved it. And for those reasons, I think it was the right choice, and it was conducted in the right way.
Okay, Senator, some others disagree with you, some of your counterparts. Mike Lee, Rand Paul, Tim Kaine, Elizabeth Warren, they've all come out. You say it was legal. They're saying it was unlawful because he first needed congressional authority.
Yeah, well, that's an age-old debate around here. We don't have 535 commander-in-chiefs. We have one. Number two, this is not a declaration of war. This is not a commitment of significant ground troops over an extended period of time. This was a strategic attack in an exigent circumstances, and the president has to have the ability to act. And that's his role as commander-in-chief, is to protect our national security interests. And every president has held that position, as I hold that position. And so not only was what he did legal, it was appropriate.
Senator, Americans are waking up across the country to the reality that our commander-in-chief ordered airstrikes against a facility in Syria because of a chemical weapons attack. A lot of people are wondering, where does this go? What happens next? The next 24 to 48 hours. Where do you hope this progresses? Well,
let me first say that this morning, Bashar al-Assad and Vladimir Putin and Iran and Hezbollah and others understand they have a different cost-benefit analysis and risk assessment. Up until this point, they figured we can do whatever we want and nothing will happen to us other than some nasty letter from the UN. Now they understand that there very well could be consequences, including the loss of aircraft. It's not like Syria has the biggest air force in the world, and the loss of important and strategic facilities. So I do think this will impact their behavior, especially in the short term. The second thing that needs to happen now is I think the United States must now engage with our Sunni allies in the region, with the Turks who have an interest in northern Syria, in constructing an alternative to Assad that includes not just the defeat of ISIS, not just the defeat of the al-Qaeda group al-Nusra, but also the removal of Assad from power, because as long as Assad is in power in Syria, there are going to be radical Sunni groups in Syria as a result of that.
Senator, a lot of people just asking the logical next question, but what do you then replace Bashar al-Assad with that's any better than him?
I think you replace it with a Syrian government that's not run by a murderous dictator. That won't happen from one day to the next. I've never said that Syria is going to become New Zealand in the next 2 years. This is a long process, but here's what it cannot be. It cannot be an ungoverned, chaotic space that is a proxy of Iran and Vladimir Putin, and it can also not be an ungoverned place that is the ideal playground for jihadist groups to come in and organize and spread their poison and their murder.
How do you prevent it? How would you prevent it from becoming another Libya, though?
Well, look what happened in Libya. In Libya, that conflict was protracted, and after the conflict ended, there was no engagement from the international community. It descended into chaos. Chaos is the breeding ground of jihadists. They gravitate there. So if you look at Syria, the majority of those ISIS fighters are not Syrians. They're foreign fighters. They went into Syria because there was no government in vast portions of the country. So we have to figure out, and I believe that they're not the best armed, they're not the best equipped, they're not the most capable right now, but non-jihadist Sunni Syrians who are prepared to govern spaces of Syria and be at that table when not just Assad's departure and I hope charges on war crimes, but also the alternative for Syria is being negotiated politically.
Senator, let me ask you this. You were senator from Florida during the Obama years, and when you would see war crimes like this happen or atrocities around the world, and there would be an international cry, hey, United States, do something, and we didn't do anything. How do you feel now that you've got a commander-in-chief who looks at things on a case-by-case basis and goes, you know what, you're right, we got to do something right there. Boom, we did it.
Yeah, so I think the decisiveness is important. I think that what he did last night was critical, and I will say one more thing. I think the president, people keep talking about 2013 and what he tweeted, this, that, or the other. He wasn't even a candidate then. He's now the president of the United States. There's a difference between being a real estate developer in New York and a private citizen and being the president. When you are the president, the weight is on your shoulders. He acknowledged that. You see those images. You get the intelligence briefings about the true impact of this attack. I think it impacted him personally to see babies. And he talked about that last night. He talked about that the day before at that press conference. I don't care who you voted for in this election. You watch those two statements, and it is clear that as a human being, as a grandfather, as a father, Donald Trump was deeply impacted by what he saw, in addition to acting on behalf of the national security of the United States. And he acted decisively, which is one of the most important things a president has to be willing to do.
He decided to send missiles into one of those airfields. You and some other guests have said that there are 6 airfields in Syria. Do you think if you were the commander-in-chief, because you were close to being that, would you have just struck one, or would you have struck all 6, like one of the generals earlier said?
Well, first of all, I would say to you that in terms of what we're going to do, I think the president is right that you don't telegraph it. All options are on the table, and there is a strategic value to saying we reserve the right to act further, that this is not the only thing we may do. I think there's a value to that, and quite frankly, it's probably the truth. The second point is I'm sure they're assessing all of that now. The president was probably presented with multiple strike options, and he chose one that he thought was the right one at this moment. I tend to agree with that decision. And now I think there are other things on the table potentially moving forward. But it's got to be part of a broader strategic plan, which I hope and believe that they're beginning to reevaluate and work on. But what had to happen last night had to happen. And otherwise, I think you could have seen another sarin attack.
Well, speaking of where you could see another attack is from North Korea, and there may not have been a coincidence that the president was dining with the president of China at the very time those missiles were leaving our warships in the Eastern Mediterranean. Talk a little bit about how this decision to send a signal to Putin and to Assad and to Tehran gives us opportunity in dealing with North Korea.
Well, and I don't believe that the president sat there and said, I'm going to do this to send a message to North Korea. I do believe it sent a message to North Korea. If you're Kim Jong-un and you're watching tonight, you're realizing we got a different thing going on here. I mean, we've got someone who doesn't just talk, he actually does some things, and he's probably worried right now. We spend a lot of time on American television being asked, aren't you worried about Putin? Aren't you worried about North Korea? Aren't you worried about the Chinese? I think for once we can be able to say, they should be worried about us, and they should be. We are more capable than they are. We have a bigger reach. Our armed services are more skilled and braver than theirs. And I think the time has come for some of these countries to be worried about us a little bit, not us always being worried about what they might do.
Sure. And Senator, before you go, it looks like today at 11:30, the Senate will confirm Neil Gorsuch as the next justice of the U.S. Supreme Court, correct?
That's fantastic. He's going to be a great justice, supremely qualified. He'll be on the court, God willing, for 25, 30 years, and just brilliant. A fantastic choice by the president, and I'm excited to be able to support him.
A big week for all 3 branches. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
All right. Meanwhile, as we've been talking, the President of the United States made his announcement down there in Mar-a-Lago, which is in Palm Beach County. And that is where our chief White House correspondent, John Roberts, is reporting from this morning. John, as we look at some of the images of the Tomahawk striking last night, the president officially found out that they had met their target, we understand, about 8:45 last night, right?
Yeah, exactly. And what's really interesting, too, Steve, about this is the timing. He had just finished up the dinner with President Xi Jinping of China, and that summit begins again this